Before we begin the episode, I would like to thank our sponsor, Chin Up Goggles, the new generation of vision training. Its simplistic design eliminates downward vision, improving a player's spatial awareness, anticipation, skill acquisition and execution. The findings have been supported by scientific research in CIT, now MTU. Be sure to visit chinupgoggles.com for more. Welcome back to the Sideline Live podcast. You can follow us over on Twitter and Instagram at the Sideline Live. We'd love to hear from you. On the second edition of the coaching series, I'm delighted to be joined by Meath inter-county football coach Colm Nally. On this episode, we had a great chat about skills, individual training, how to structure your own training, a discussion on water breaks, and how to balance instinct versus instruction. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hi Colm, thanks a million for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks very much for the invite, Earl. I'm looking forward to it.
Brilliant. Before we get into everything, would you be able to give a little bit of background to the listeners who might not know who you are?
Okay. My name's Colm Nally. I'm a coach with the Meath senior football teams at the moment. I've played Gaelic football all my life, starting out with O'Dwyer's and some Dublin underage panels before moving down to Louth and playing for Newtown Blues and Louth for a few years. And somehow I've ended up coaching the Meath senior team for the last 3 years. So a dub who played for Louth coaching Meath, so that always gets a good reaction now when we talk to fellas about that. You know?
Yeah, exactly. At what point in your career did you look towards coaching and kind of know I want to take coaching seriously?
I've always been interested in coaching. When I was playing football with O'Dwyer's, my Brigham, I was working as a Dáil usher in Leinster House, and I used to work late nights and miss training, so I'd always be looking to find out what the lads did in training, and I always be jotting down diagrams and things like that. I used to enjoy taking the warm-ups for the team and stuff like that, so I always had an interest in coaching, and I suppose even like down through playing the Blues when I was captain of the Blues, I'd be doing some parts of the session, and I'd always had an interest in what we were trying to play and set up. And so I really always had an interest in that. I think being a goalkeeper, I was probably a frustrated player and wanted to do a little bit more. So I got involved in that end of it. And I played well into my late 30s, and then was always coaching the background, being with underage teams or whatever, So it was a natural path to follow for me, I suppose.
Would you have done a Morgan and a Began on it running upfield, or did you stay within your own little space?
Well, I come off the line quite a bit, which, was more to do with bad eyesight, I think, than anything else, really, to make sure I could see what was happening. But yeah, look, I mean, at that time when I was playing football, John O'Leary was playing with us, and John played outfield. For the club, and I played in goals. So John always reckoned that his playing outfield helped him as a goalkeeper when he was playing for Dublin. So I mean, even though it wasn't the trend that it is now today, there was elements of it there with the really top guys like the likes of John O'Leary and that in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. When did you start to get involved in adult teams and sort of that inter-county or kind of higher level of coaching?
Well, believe it or not, I was quite young when I fell into sort of the player manager role with the Newtown Blues. Mm-hmm. I was player manager for 3 years with them in Jesus, I was 31 or something at the time, and so it was kind of a combination of nobody wanted the job, you're the loudest voice, you're the loudest voice there, will you take it? So I'd done that for 3 years, and you know what, it was great. We won our first league in nearly 20 years. We were beaten in the championship final. Right, so we kind of came from nowhere with no expectations, and it was a great learning curve for it, but it was very, very difficult to sort of combine both, trying to play and trying to manage. So I kind of then, when we seemed to have got back on track, I stepped down and continued to play with a new manager then, which was an unusual dynamic, but it stood well to me in terms of being able to kind of know your place in a management team, like going from player manager then to back just to playing. Some people would have found that difficult. I was quite happy because I just loved playing. I just loved being involved.
Mm-hmm. You spoke about before your role with Meath. I suppose you're a coach there, and that's different to a manager, obviously. But talk us through why you prefer being a coach. I've heard you speak about it before, and maybe why, like, your sort of role on game day versus, let's say, a manager.
Well, it's a really good question, that, because I think a lot of people need to experience different things, really, and then to decide what's best for them. Now, the management is fine, but like when you're managing particularly big roles, a lot of your time is gone off to sort of organisation, checking on pitches, checking on your backroom team, checking on your players, managing up and managing down. I don't mean that to sound sort of fluffy or whatever, but you have to deal with county boards, you have to deal with sponsors maybe, then you have to deal with your management team, you have to deal with players. So there's a lot of it. So you're actually not actually getting to do what probably you might like most. For me now, it's boots on the pitch, getting amongst players. Like I'm happiest on a Tuesday and Thursday when you're out in the mouth and losing your voice, giving instructions, that sort of stuff. Where I feel, maybe certain clubs you can do both. It's certainly the bigger clubs is quite difficult. So I found as I went on, I said, God, I prefer this better than actually, having to arrange buses, having to arrange this, having to arrange that. Now that's nearly all done for a manager at a county level, but still, you're the first port of call to check was everything okay. So your mind is elsewhere. So it was great to get that. I first experienced it with Louth. I was coach with Louth for a couple of years with Colm Nally, and then the opportunity came up for Meath. So I had learned a lot in them couple of years with Louth in terms of how to be sort of a coach and know what lines not to cross and what to do.
How do you think you've evolved as a coach over the last number of years? You mentioned there, like taking your learnings from Louth into the Meath panel, but I suppose maybe over the last couple of years, how do you think you've evolved as the game has evolved as well?
Well, I've definitely, like, I'd be a big believer in sort of learning, unlearning and relearning, and like you have to reflect an awful lot of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you model the game? Is what you're doing in training modeling the game? And when I look back, I've always documented my sessions, and when I look back now, I see that I used to do an awful lot of closed exercises, which means there was little or no decision making for the players. You were telling them to go from this cone to that cone to this, whatever, where I've evolved a lot now to sort of more open activities where there's more decisions making. The best example I can give you that is there's a lot of training taught out there at the moment about simple hand passing exercises where more and more coaches are moving to more rondo style hand passing exercises where you might have 2 versus 4, where the 4 are keeping the ball away from the 2 just via a hand pass. And there's far more decisions for that player to learn. There's far more options. There's far more sort of things going on rather than just going round in a square hand pass. Now, that has its place for younger players, probably for sort of technical development. But in terms of open exercises, so I would have, like, I've evolved from that. I noticed through video in our own sessions and things like that, that nearly between almost up to 30% of the time you could be spent moving from exercise to exercise, having water breaks and things like that. So I'm trying to learn how to deliver a message through that 30% rather than stopping exercises and things like that, because that's very, very key. You can stop the flow of a session by mistake by just talking too much and things like that. So by reflecting on that, you picked up an awful lot of saying, God, keep your messaging short, keep your open questions kind of to maybe a water break or something like that, or when you're introducing the new exercise. So I mean, definitely evolve with that, and then that brings it to the use of technology, like, which allows you kind of have an input in terms of S&C. Are you hitting all the your GPS figures through your football? All that sort of stuff. So it's evolved massively. Where before it used to be trusting your eye and your feel for are we getting them fit or are they hitting the right spots. Now you have all that sort of technology. So embracing that and learning about that, because when we were Loud at the first time, and we were sponsored by Stat Sports, and I remember initially I had been handed documents with barcode, with bar charts and things like that, and really not having a clue what I was looking for. Now again, so you have to kind of brush up on that and try to get what you want from your S&C guys in terms of stats, and work with them, and like sharing training sessions and explaining that you reckon the RPE for this one might be 8 or 9, and seeing there's a tally with the GPS. So there's great learning in that end of it, and then documenting that and saying, well, I know we can get a hit off that one or this and that, So totally evolved and embracing all that sort of stuff.
You mentioned there kind of taking notes in your sessions. I'm interested in that. Is that to kind of see, we kind of say, right, this drill worked well, this one didn't work well, and then you just mentioned there, this is sort of the effort wise with this session. So then if you want to replicate that session, let's say maybe close to a match, to maybe tailor it back a little bit because there's a match coming up.
Well, look, I suppose what you're looking at really is game modelling. So first thing is when you're planning your sessions, does it actually model the game that's going on at the minute? Does it actually model what you're trying to do? Now, I keep making this point to a few people, right, that you have quite a bit of time to fill in training sessions. Like, you can't do everything on modeling, you can't do everything on tactics, you can't do everything that, but there's a massive place for that. So you kind of, it depends how close you would be to a competition, I suppose, in terms of what you would do. But most of my training sessions that we do would have some sort of game modeling in it, which would be kind of basically planning on what way you're trying to play, or what way you're trying to counter a team play. Like, every system, we reckon every system has a flaw, and you're trying to expose that flaw, like a team's trying to expose your flaws, stuff like that. So you'll be doing a lot of work on that. So by sort of documenting your session and sort of reviewing what went well and what didn't, what was kind of realistic, what wasn't realistic, you get to kind of plan sort of in advance too, in terms of if the match was coming up and you were playing you were working on sort of defending a big man in the square, you would have exercises for that, and you'd know if that worked, I'd put that aside. So I know then the next time we're playing a team with a similar fashion, you can bring that session out again. Again, all players in all county teams now fill in the forms, their databases, in terms of they found that hard, they rated that hard. So, I mean, that information is good to know too, in terms of planning sort of your intensity for sessions prior to matches and things like that. So documenting and reflecting training sessions is a lot, and getting feedback. Now, it's very difficult to get feedback as a coach, because years ago, I used to say to players walking off the field, what do you think of that? What do you think of that? And they'd all say, great, good, because they see you as a kind of stakeholder in this, and that you're one of the men that decide whether they play or not. So they're not going to say anything against it. So kind of moved on from that end of it. So you have to try to seek their feedback from the manager, from fellow coaches, and indeed from your video and your sessions looking back, because sometimes the best feedback is just staring you in the eyes there, where you say, God, did I talk that much there? Jesus, that I didn't realize we were doing that. There was it looked like no intensity in that, because you get lost in the middle of it at times. You don't notice. So feedback like that is very, very important.
Is that one of the main reasons why you started videoing your training sessions, was to kind of look for that feedback for yourself?
Yeah, and because I'm getting old and I'd forget, what things look like. So that was another reason that you can kind of just, have a look at sort of saying, yeah, well, now I remember what I did there. And what's great, looking back on some of the video sessions, you're saying, maybe the next time I'll add this to it, or I'll add that to it, or if I tried here or tried there, so that's very, very important. And I think it's also good too, because I'll give you an example. I remember we were doing sort of just some complex exercises, double balls, left foot, right foot, and we were kind of trying to put them through traffic, so that there's a bit of evasion, and they're challenged a little bit rather than going straight lines and things like that. And I noticed there was one or two players who would never use the left foot.
So you're catching them out on the video.
Yeah, but in the middle of it, I wouldn't see that, or you wouldn't see that. But it's only on reflection. He hasn't used his left foot at all in this, So that allowed you to then bring that feedback to the players, and create an environment where you're saying, look, we don't care about you messing up, but you have to be like, just give it a go, and it's the only way you're going to get it.
Absolutely. You put a lot of the videos out on YouTube. Talk me through that decision, and kind of, I suppose in the GAA we've gotten so secretive, like you won't tell the next club 5 minutes down the road what you're doing, but at training you're probably doing the same thing anyway. So talk me through that decision to kind of put it publicly.
Well, see, I suppose wearing my tutor hat, like I tutor for Leinster Council and Leinster GAA, and I'm involved in the Master Tutor Group. And again, given all the courses, like the first question you're asked when you're given a coaching course is, have you any good drills for this? Have you any good drills for that? And that's all. So I mean, even down to the books and that, I was saying, well, the information's not out there. So like, I'd be very sensitive in terms of what I'm putting the YouTube channel and on Twitter, in terms of I put some individual skill sets up there. I put a lot of kind of just closed exercises. You're not given anything. You're not compromising any of the teams that you work. I put club teams exercises. I put county teams exercises, and feedback from it has been amazing. In that people are kind of saying that it's great to see. Now, look, again, as I said, the most important thing is that you're not compromising anybody. There's no tactical up there, and you couldn't do that. But I think it's a good opportunity to see that some of the top players kind of just doing some of the basic work, because at the end of the day, like, I mean, it's the whole thing is convoluted by coaches like us. We try to confuse things in terms of just keeping it nice and simple. So I'd love to see more of it myself. I know lots of other sports share. There's a couple of reasons I reckon why we don't share. I think number one is because people haven't got the confidence to share. I remember when I was starting doing this, one or two fellas said to me, "You're very brave for putting that stuff out." And I was saying, well, firemen and doctors and nurses are brave. Like, I'm not, but I know what they're talking about. They're saying you're leaving yourself open to ridicule, and I've got plenty of that. plenty of people that have come up and saying, "Jesus, no wonder they're not winning when doing things like that and stuff like that." But deep down, I think anybody that's involved in coaching, just all they need is a start thought. So I mean, like if they're looking for say some kick passing exercises, they might just go to there and pick out one or two and say, right, I'll add this to it or I'll change it up with that. But it gets them thinking, it gets the creative juices flowing. Mm-hmm. And that's what we need. We need more of it. We need share. And I get a lot of people sharing stuff back with me. They will say, what were you trying to do here? Would you not think if you added this and that? And I said, geez, that's great. And that adds value. I'm quite happy to take on board, you know. So it's look, it's a hobby for me, Orla. And I said, I've been approached, believe it or not, by several people to put it behind a paywall, but I don't believe in that. That's not what we're about. Like the information, we haven't enough information as an organization out there for coaches. Like I know all about the award ones, the award twos, the coaching course, the coaching conference, they're all brilliant, but still down, a lot of people just want a few ideas to start from. And I hope that's what I just try to do with that, you know.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned there confidence. How do you develop confidence as a coach?
Well, I think it comes a little bit with age, right? And you can have a great time coaching and everything goes well for you. And, you know, you think this is easy and we're going, and then all of a sudden you hit a wall. Like, I think I was thinking to myself there, reading through some of the stuff, preparing for tonight. We lose more competitions than we win. Like only one team can win a championship or a league, right? So you spend more time in the losing kind of sort of bracket than the winning bracket. But if you're making an impact, if you're getting on with players, if you're having fun, right, I think the confidence comes from that. If players then begin to engage with you, ask you questions, kind of start probing them and looking for advice how they can get better, you're making a connection. And that's what coaching is. Coaching is making a connection and building a rapport. And if you can do that first, then that's the first sort of line in trying to be successful in coaching, because there's a trust that there's a confidence building in you, and you sense that. So that's how I would do it, is try to win them over, try to build rapport, engage them. And remember all the time, I know it sounds a little bit out there, but you're coaching people, not players. You're coaching people who happen to play Gaelic football, you know, and they're in it for the same reasons as you, like they for a pastime, a hobby, and sort of to improve, you know.
Yeah, exactly. I'm interested as well in sort of balancing improving teams and individuals. Coaching sort of individually is sort of something I'm getting into at the moment with my own teams. But how do you find trying to balance? Yes, you have a team session here, you need to improve as a team, but I suppose something you do a lot is that individual skill set.
Yeah, well, as a footballer, and I suppose it's the same as a coach, but definitely as a footballer and a team, you're either getting better or you're either getting worse. Right, you're never standing still. Mm-hmm. So, like again, you know, when players reflect on themselves, right, same thing. If they have that thought in their head, I'm either getting better or I'm either getting worse. So again, practice an individual, I think, is massive. Now, again, it has to be fitting in with your schedule as such. Like, I mean, like a lot of even top teams, you're in championship mode now. A lot of teams now are training a lot. They've got their S&C. They've got a lot going on at home. So it's hard to find that time to practice. But the ones that really love and the ones that are passionate about, find that time. It could be just 20 minutes here, it could be 20 minutes there. I used to always say to some of the younger players who used to go out for runs, I'd say, you'd be better off, like if you didn't mind me saying, go down to pitch and soloing from one end of the goals, one end of the pitch to the other, shooting over the bar, picking up the ball and soloing back with your left foot and doing the same for 20 minutes. So you're getting your cardio, plus you're getting ball skills. So it's about identifying skills you want to improve, I think, straight away. So what I mean by that is, so we highlight everything that you're good at, and you reinforce why you're good at that, and you practice that, and then you try to get the other ones up to speed as well. You know, so if you have good hang time for a high ball, if you've got good in-step passing, I'd always kind of make sure that when you're doing an individual session, I'd encourage players that they start off with them, right? Keep working them, because that builds your confidence, that builds your self-awareness. Now that, yeah, I am good at this, and then start introducing gradually the little bits you want to work on. Now, I mentioned on a couple of courses before about tennis-style feedback. So tennis-style feedback is, if you can imagine, I can't remember the girl that won the US Open from England, right? But if you can imagine her coach, right? Her coach is just giving feedback to her on her game and her style. We can't do that in terms of Gaelic football, because you could have 32 players in front of you. So it's difficult. So if you can find time to give tennis-style feedback to players, the better. So what I mean by that is that's one player and you give him a couple of pieces of advice to that player on a one-to-one basis. Now that sort of stuff is empowerment, right? Particularly for young players, if you can find that time and you can find that know-how for it. And it's coming more and more into sort of, if you have a large coaching team, you can kind of break it down to a number of players and say, okay, will you watch this player for A, B, and C, and see can we give them some pointers on some tips for them to work on their own. And again, not in a group setting, but in a one-on-one set situation. Do you know that way? It's so that's very powerful. So I mean, finding the time or trying to integrate that into training is a really powerful tool, I think.
How do you integrate that? Do you take time before and after sessions? Is it maybe even during sessions sometimes?
Well, what I would do, like, I mean, again, as we were speaking earlier on, like that's another good reason for the videos, because you say, for instance, you're playing an in-house game and you have that recorded and you see somebody off balance shooting, right? Okay, it might have been a once off, but then if you see it again, you can say, well, maybe there is an issue here, right? So again, you can kind of pick that out and maybe speak about sort of balance, or your support arm, or your hard foot, or something like that. Like, again, a lot of issues in skills, as we know, comes from your head, hands, or feet. Mm-hmm. So again, I'd always use that approach, and even when you're working with fellow coaches, just always kind of say that to them: is it the head, hands, or feet? Is the head out? Is the eyes closed? Is the head tilting for a high ball? Do you know what I mean? Are they unbalanced? Or have they got the shoulder to the goals when they're shooting for a kind of a hook kick and stuff like that? So again, if you can kind of simplify it for the coaches who can kind of identify one or two issues, then give them back the feedback from that. So again, it would be mainly observation, watching through games. And again, that's when you need your team. Like, there's a lovely saying out there about if the team behind the team is not a team, it can't help the team. Yeah. So if your team is your background team is all working at one, so we're one team, we'll benefit the team that's in front of us. So that's us then identifying things together and highlighting them things together for the players. So again, we would watch for little things like that.
You mentioned before individual learning plan. I think I have the name right with that. Is that like something ILPs. ILP, yeah. Is that something that you have nearly as a document with players, or is that nearly something you just encourage them and they think about themselves?
Well, it's fascinating because like when I started with as a player manager with the Blues when I was quite young, but then I started taking our local club, my local underage teams, to start taking the Blues because my son was involved. And so from about 7 years of age, I was with them from about 7 till about 21, and brought them all the way through and spent years with them, with lots of other coaches as well, and got involved with them in the seniors as well. So it was something that we would trial there. Like, so for instance, when you have a very young player, maybe I'm talking about 10 to 12-year-olds, you would have an individual learning plan in your mind for them, but you wouldn't be discussing it with them because it's very, very delicate at that time in terms of you're just trying to get them, to learn, and by having fun and stuff like that. But you would be watching, saying, right, okay, we need to keep working on this left side or the right side or that with them, but you wouldn't share that with them. As they get older, you kind of agree it with them. So when they turn to about 16 or 18, you can sit down and discuss, like by just open questioning, how do you think you're getting on? What skills do you think you're really good at? What skills would you like to be good at? And then they nearly tell you. So you agree then your learning plan with them. The older players, like a county player, is they're so tuned into all that sort of stuff. They just want to, they know, like, again, I'm my only thing with a lot of county players is I want them to reinforce what they're good at first, but they just want to go straight in working on what they think they need to improve on. Right? And I'm saying, yeah, that's fine, but squeeze in reinforce what you are good at. Like, basically, it's about, as I was saying to the players, if you can be unpredictable to the opposition, but predictable to your teammates. And that would come from you practicing on your own a lot. Like, the top players, dummy solos, evasion, anything like that. Become unpredictable again to your opponents, but your teammates are aware of what you're going to do, that sort of stuff. So, that's where your individual learning plans are really, really powerful for sort of older players. And they would embrace that. And it comes back down to your tennis style feedback and you having that chat and them saying, listen, I'd love to be able to do this with bilaterally or whatever, and see, can you kind of come up with a few exercises. Like, another thing that we spoke about before is simply the arrival activities, which I think are very, very powerful. Like, even if you arrive at training and training's at 7:30, and most county players are there early because they're really, really keen. They're there at 7 o'clock. So it's about identifying a few things that they could do before that, in that sort of block of 10, 20 minutes that might help them develop that, be it free taking, be it, just sort of quick feet for tackling, learning about stutter steps, things like that, So again, just they all have a few ideas that they go off and work, and rather than just taking 45s like they all do.
Yeah. So is that something you would facilitate a lot at training, is when the lads arrive early, you have stuff like, let's say, a couple of bags of footballs or whatever just laid out for them, ready for them to just kind of get through their plan?
To be honest with you, it's something we try, and again, like every start of the season, you're very enthusiastic and they're set up on that, and then as the season goes on, you kind of go away from it. But I think if you do it enough time, the players pick up the habits themselves, and they come out and they will kind of do specific work themselves. Then like, so they would sort of, you're creating that culture where they want to kind of do a little bit of 10 minutes or whatever, working on this and that and the other before the collective training starts. So if you started off even and get the ball rolling, you do get a little bit of a hangover from it, in terms of they keep the sort of the idea alive.
Mm-hmm. And with the top players, do they ask for feedback much during those kind of sessions? Like, let's say before a training session, oh Colm, would you mind having a look at my dummy solo or my dummy hopper or something like that?
Yeah, they would. Yeah, I would find that. I would find, like, what you'd get with them is they'd ask you questions maybe at the end of a session, saying, look, I don't know if you noticed during the game there, but I mean, like, I might be off balance kicking. Have you any ideas of how I can keep here and that, stuff like that? Now, look, I think that's great, and I would always try to say to players, if they do just kind of, I won't say gazump you, but if they hit you down the line, I'd say, listen, let me have a think about it. Rather than just, because if you want to do it justice, you can't just rattle it off. You'd have to say, right, let me see, number one, what's he talking about? And number two, can I just help him can I add value to what he's asking, right? Not just lip service. So I'd always say, just let me think about it, and I'd go home. And again, I think some of the best learning tools is looking at other players, looking at the top players, looking at, like, I mean, the previous All-Ireland just gone and the semi-finals, like picking clips, looking at stuff like that. And again, what we have is you kind of nearly creating an environment, a culture where players are talking to each other on the WhatsApp groups and saying, did you see that? And at that part of the game and this, that, and the other, is that something we can look at? That sort of stuff. So when you have that, that's brilliant, because you have a team that's kind of thinking about it and trying to build a relationship with the game sense that's required for playing it.
I'm interested, as I said before, in the individual sort of approach to improving. For an individual session, if I was to go out, like I was out earlier kicking, I had my plan going out, what advice would you give players or coaches on structuring that individual session? I know it's different for everyone because we all have our different strengths and weaknesses, but how would you typically maybe structure a session like that?
Well, again, I would be a big believer if you could find one a week, a time for one a week, even around now, because at the end of the day, like, it all comes down to sort of as many touches as you can get with the ball. And sometimes, we can get lost in training sessions. It could be a tactical session, it could be a 15 against 15 match, and your touches is minimum. So if you could find that once a week, so I'd always kind of structure it, right, where you would be very, very simple, a ball warmer, right, and that could be done. You'd have to make sure, like, a lot of players who go down on their own, they ignore that part of warm up. They just want to get down to the nitty gritty. So I would always kind of emphasize that they spend at least 15 to 18 minutes doing a proper warm up with the ball, and that could consist of juggling, keepy uppies, that sort of stuff, and building in your dynamic stretching and that with it, all with the ball. And then, depending on what you want to work with, see, it can be difficult all at times if you're on your own and you want to work on tackling and you want to work on specifics. And the thing about working on your own is you're not going to be challenged in terms of anybody tackling you or blocking space around that. So a lot of your options. So again, it depends what you really want to work on. So the closest thing you can ask them there is to be performing some of the skills slightly fatigued. So for instance, if they're doing some shooting, like I would be a big believer that if you could have sort of maybe 9 or 10 balls just spread around the scoring zone that you're comfortable with, and you give yourself a time of how many you can score in that one, or many wide you kick, that sort of stuff, but put yourself on the clock. So that's bringing a different type of pressure on that, because you won't be able to get a pressure of somebody tackling you obviously on your own. I think you could do plenty of sort of passing exercises. I really believe the 30-meter pop pass is a massive part in the game now. If you can master that with both feet, it's a super skill to have. So stuff like that can be really done on your own. Again, building it in when you're slightly fatigued, maybe soling the ball with both feet for about 50 yards before you actually deliver it left and right, that sort of stuff. So again, putting yourself under a tiny bit of pressure, right, and putting the skill set under a little bit of pressure. So training on your own, the best way that I get to that would be either timing or sort of fatigue for likes of that. Again, free taking, there's lots of good information about free taking, and one of the most important things about free taking is tricking your mind. So starting really, really close, where it's difficult to miss before you actually pull back and have longer kicks, rather than starting long and missing 3 or 4 on the bounce, things like that. So being specific in what you're doing, like, so if you're practicing like free kicks or goal kicks, starting off easy, right, build your confidence first, that sort of stuff, and keep always talking to yourself about it. Right, good connection there. I heard that the proper connection, stuff like that. Particularly for goalkeepers. Like, I always say to goalkeepers, you can nearly hear when it's a good kick out, rather before you see it, because they've got their head down looking for the follow through. So if they make proper connection with the ball, you can nearly hear that sweet spot connection, stuff like that. So watch out for things like that, like we kind of saying now. And then, say for instance, you do connect the ball in the sweet spot, you have to kind of say to yourself, what did I do there? Right? Yeah. How did what exactly did I do there? So retrace their movements, and that's you then sort of ingraining good habits all the time, So stuff like that, that's what I'd be encouraging.
It's like when something goes wrong, let's say you miss a free kick, it's questioning what went wrong there, but then when it goes well, you said, well, what went well there, and trying to kind of frame those into good and bad habits.
Yeah, and there's a lovely coaching phrase there called saying catch people in.
Yeah.
So when you do something good, reinforce it, right? Or the R one, which is after action review. So straight away you can do that yourself. Or after action review. The minute I carry out something that went well, right, you reinforce it by saying, right, what did I do? Like, I'd always say to the lads and goalkeepers, like, it's like the long jump. If you think of a long jump, a lot of people have just hit the board before they jump at the right time without looking. So that's spent by ages of them counting their steps back and their 2 to the left or right, whatever top speed. Goal kick, free taking and all, that's the exact same. That's why you see them all with their sort of long build-ups or their little, their double bounces before they kick or anything like that. That's just them, putting their sort of their process in mind.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of skill, what do you see as the most underrated or possibly overlooked skill by players or coaches at the moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what I have there was, I think, movement.
Okay.
So taught a lot about this. So on the ball, off the ball, player circulation, ball circulation. It's not always about passing the ball. It's understanding whether to move the ball or move the players. But it all comes down to movement, right? So movement is massive. Like, movement creates reaction. So if that could be the ball, that could be you, but definitely moving. We started very simply at the kickouts, right? More movement, more options for the goalkeeper, right? You win a long kickout, the more options you have moving towards it, away from you, the more decisions you have to make, and the more sort of options you have. Again, when you're trying to break down stack defenses or whatever, right? You've got to get the movement of the players emptying out and filling in spaces, swinging the ball, trying to circulate players, trying to circulate the ball, trying to create gaps, but then trying to get the players to identify, when to move and where to move, creating space, decoy runs, all that hinged on movement. And I think it's something that we probably don't reflect on enough, particularly in younger players when they're playing games. Like, if you watch even the Go games, right, you'll see them standing in their zones, waiting for the ball, not moving. They're waiting for the ball to come to them. So again, I think we're missing a little trick there in terms of coaching movement and explaining to players why you want to move, and talking about things like third runs and stuff like that happens from movement. So to me, movement would be probably the most underrated. I know it's kind of sort of a long-winded answer, but it's just one word, right? And the everything that you can get from it is, there's so many permutations from explaining why we need movement.
Mm-hmm. Movement on the ball is probably something that good players are good at, but as a coach, how do I teach movement off the ball?
Yeah, well, there's you'd have to do it through sort of certain games, I would imagine, right? So again, like if you were to do a session, say on third run, where you would have 3 players, and what I mean by the third run is, if I pass to you, that's the first part. If you collect the ball, that's the second part. It's someone moving off you then to collect it is the third part. So things like that. So that's very, very simple to introduce at a young player. And then you build that into some sort of, you would build it into a closed, probably drill first there, where you're especially for younger players, where not a lot of decisions to be made in it, but you're working on timing and sequencing, and you're working on how the ball moves, and then bring it into some sort of small-sided games where you're highlighting every third run, right? Then you could build it into sort of backs against forwards games, stuff like that, and putting a little condition on that where everybody has to move, and freezing the game every now and again, and asking the players, Why did you move there? What did you see? All that sort of stuff. So that's, to me, that's very, very important. But like for when you're introducing something like that, you'd have to do it in them little phases. I would think, particularly with younger players, warm-ups, and then sort of some sort of closed exercises where there's not a lot of decisions, but the message is just that movement. And then in small-sided free games, asking them different questions and stuff like that through it. So that's how I would do that. Yeah.
I find sometimes with some of the players, it's nearly like they have to buy in, because sometimes with movement, you don't actually touch the ball. You're making a move for someone else to move into that space. How do you, like, I suppose with the buy-in, with top players, they're there for a reason. They're going to buy in. But as maybe for the younger kids, how do you kind of encourage that buy-in?
Yeah. Well, see, the main thing, like, it depends really what age you're talking about. You're probably looking at what's called, what I suppose, experimental learning. So they learn through experience. So what you would do is sometimes you would organise activities and games where to them it's just play, but to you've got lots of messages in it and hidden messages in it.
Yeah.
So again, you try to form habits and create habits. Like, I mean, we all, even like if you were to go down tonight with an adults girls team and put bibs on them and got everybody trying to tag their bibs, you'll see a massive movement, massive laugh, massive fun, but there's massive learning in that. Okay, in terms of evasion and moving and why you're moving and that sort of stuff, and then try to bring that into sort of some game situations, but it needs to be explained after a while of why you're doing it. An awful lot of training like that is like, you get good at what you do. So if you do a lot of linear exercise and things like that, you get good at that. If you do a lot of games where there's a lot of chaos, they get good at that. And again, it goes back down to the players trying to find the flaws or in each other's systems, and that's them figuring it out themselves. But trying to organize activities for the younger kids where everybody's moving, and then explaining all the time with little nuggets of why they're moving. And if something comes up, again, catching them in. If a move works out and somebody made a decoy run to create space and somebody ran into the space, reinforcing it, stopping that and saying, did you see what happened there? And saying that was brilliant, and that happened because you ran here and you could run there and stuff like that, And again, you'll get much more buy-in from positivity than negativity,
Absolutely. How do you balance then instinct and instruction? Because I was at a game the other week, an underage game, and the players actually couldn't think for themselves because there was so much instruction coming from the sideline. So how do you find balancing that instinct during training sessions and matches?
It's a tough one, and like that as well, I've been at a lot of games where the only voice you can hear recently is the coaches, and telling them to move here, telling them to move there. So basically, what I would be suggesting look, again, it goes back to what we were chatting earlier on about how you evolve as a coach, and you'd have to understand sometimes where these coaches are on their sort of coaching journey. Are they new coaches? Have they done the coaching courses? Like, they might not have. They might be just mums or dads that have volunteered, and yourself, they're trying their best. That happens quite a bit, but most clubs would have sort of a coaching officer or some sort of coaching football sort of committee that might be able to then sort of impart them. But I feel like there isn't a need to instruct in games. I think maybe even during games in training I wouldn't. So I'd be saying let players experience context in training. And what I mean by that is sort of understand why they're doing this and understand what the consequences of this is and that is, right? And that doesn't happen by you shouting on the line or giving instruction. So I would I would try to put players out of their comfort zone in training, and I would try as a coach to coach in your grey area. And what I mean by that is, like, there's black and there's white. So I mean, black and white coaching is everything's going great. You're playing 10 against 10. You're doing that. So a grey area kind of coaching would be playing 10 against 13. Right, where you're a little bit out of your comfort zone as well, because you don't know what's going to happen. So putting great situations like that where the players kind of have to sort of work things out themselves. So I really think that sort of in training or maybe in games, I mean, you should say nothing or less during games. Right, I really do believe that. Right, let the players sort of figure it out themselves. Now, again, very, very younger players, you have to sort of organize them and put them in positions and that from the start. But even like once they're picking up the context of what the game is about and why they're running here, why they're running there, it's time for us to step back and let them figure it out themselves.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're losing that flair from the game because there's so much instruction from the sideline at all?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of fear. I think a lot of coaches are fearful that they need to be sort of, they don't trust the players yet. You know, they can't see the long term benefits of of less instruction during the game. See, again, as I said to you, right, like if a team is playing a sweeper, if a team is playing two sweepers, right, be it a league match, be it an underage match, it'd be more powerful by letting your team figure out how to break that down, rather than you telling them what to do in the long term, because that means they're problem solving, and they're problem solving in real time. Like as they progress in their careers and onto, please God, senior teams, club teams, or whatever they're, you know, they can't be looking to the line for the answers.
Yeah.
You know, because like I know, like I mean, when you're on the line, right, what happens there is, you're always trying to figure out what the other team is trying to do, right? But you want your team to figure that out before you. You know, so if they can figure that out before you, that's a big plus. But that won't come if you're given instruction, or if they're being led by instruction all through the years. Now, again, your proper questioning and your timing of the questions can really, really help that. And it's empowering players kind of when you're asking them, you know, what did they see, and what do you think they were trying to do? Like, well, what would you do again? All that sort of stuff, you know. And that's how the players learn, and they embrace that, and then they'll go out and try to figure it out themselves. You know, so again, yeah, I would say nothing or less even in games if possible.
Speaking about instruction, how did you find the water breaks and having 2 extra times of kind of contact time with your players? Did you have any particular structure at all in terms of that water break? Was it just try get the key messages out again?
Well, we tried a few things. Number one, I do think it was a necessity, right? Because in the time we were with COVID or whatever, like, it was very important that the players got their water intake. So I mean, I have no issue in that end of it. I think it might be going back to normal next year. I'm not sure, but what I noticed, right, was when they came in first, lots of the management teams tried different things. Look, the power of 3 is massive. Players can only take on 2 or 3 pieces of information. So it's very vital that if you are using that time to give a little bit of information, that it's just concise, whatever. But what I found happened was it became nearly tactical. Like I would know, and we tried it once or twice ourselves. And during the water break, particularly your attack, when they go back in, we'd be encouraging them not to go back into the positions they started. Go to new positions, right? Just to see, can you unsettle or unnerve your opponents for a moment, you know, because, you know, a lot of teams would have designated man marks. Then all of a sudden they're expecting to mark me and I go back to a different position. Yeah. Just throws your opponent. So we know it was little things like that. Teams were trying different tactical things after the water break, you know. So again, it's like everything else. Like I do think that a lot of coaching and a lot of the top GA coaches are brilliant, and they don't need much to sort of try to come up with new ideas, and they will evolve no matter what's thrown with the new rules or anything. You'll always see the coaches then are just so adaptable, and they come up with something. And I noticed things like that, as I said to you, that it nearly became tactical. They would try a new tactic. They might line out differently. It's restarting from a kick out, so they would have a set kick out. They'd be looking to sort of exploit, maybe, because that's very difficult. You could put a big man on a small man, and it just, you haven't picked it up. And that goes back to what we talked about, your problem solving then from the players. Like, I mean, if you have a team that's kind of on top of their game in awareness of these, they'll pick that out themselves, like, so you won't be exposed by the time you would see. So little things like that I definitely noticed in the water breaks, you know.
You mentioned before about, I think it was halftime talk. I don't know if this was if the water breaks were in or not, but you said players prefer fact, not emotion. How important is being able to present the facts to the players instead of getting them all excited and, you know, the famous pre-game speech and all this stuff?
Yeah, I think that, like, I mean, like, look, a lot of that's a lot of time to fill halftime, and if you start ranting and raving, like, the message is gone. Players switch off, like, you know. So they have to come in, they have to refuel, they have to cool down, and they have to compose themselves. Okay, and then they have to get ready for the message that you want to take. So I mean, there's lots of different strategies. Like, I mean, there'd be the hydro therapy, where you would get a lot of players come in and they'd have cold towels, right? Okay. And what they would cool their heads down, bring their body temperature down. But the best thing about that was, it was just sort of placebo effect. It was giving them something to do that they felt sort of made them sort of, got them prepared, ready for the second half. But it was buying a bit of time, that they weren't just sitting idly in dressing rooms. Then a lot of teams probably would go in huddles and they'd have their own little chat, which is great. And again, you want to empower teams with that. And then gives the management team time to sort of gather what they want, talk to their stats and their stats man, and then deliver some important points. Again, trying to be positive, trying to kind of offer solutions, trying to sort of work with them in terms of sorting out and figuring out what the opponents are trying to do. Like little things like stats are very, very important, but some stats kind of can get lost. Like for instance, I know like everything's always evolving, but I know now like a lot of teams, when we're recording kick out retention, they don't class a kick out retained until they get across the halfway line. So to me, things like that are very good, because that changes the mindset of your team. So for instance, rather than having, in say in the first half, 18 kickouts and 13 successful, and 4 or 5 of them could have been to the edge of the D, you now have a different stat where you had 18 kickouts and 9 were successful. Mm-hmm. So that means you broke the line and by the halfway line. So it's making you think a little bit differently, challenging the players. And you could simply say to them right now, look, the averages, we're probably going to have another 16 kickouts in the second half. Can we get that up to 10 or 12, that type of thing? So you're giving them a realistic target and stuff like that. And what that does is, to me, that's a fact. That's a straight. That's okay. We know we have a job to do. We know like there's no grey area there. It's black and white. And players, I think, want to respond to that. So again, I would try to keep it down to the 3 or 4 key points and give them a few targets and stuff like that to hit. And then, like by the time you have your second water break, you could even actually deliver that message to them where we've got this or we haven't got that.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Kind of speaking about your own intercounty career and comparing it to now, what do you find is the biggest difference really in terms of whether it's training, schedule, commitment? Obviously gym and nutrition is now huge. Even tactically, I know the game has changed so much, even over the last number of years, with all of the rule changes that keep coming in.
Yeah, well, so I think, my time playing, like I probably finished playing around 2010 type of thing. And what I notice is that now compared to now, I think today's county players are so tuned in to everything. Okay. Like, I mean, it's the old adage in that, like we used to have to do pre-season for a reason. Right, and that was because the majority of the players came back with a couple of pounds overweight, and they probably would winter well. Now there was different seasons, and then I suppose but so a lot of players now would take a couple of weeks off downtime. Like a lot of clubs now are already would be keeping their toes as well. But I think a player is so fine tuned. He knows everything about his nutrition. He knows everything about sort of getting stronger. He knows everything about how to prehab. Like prehab is massive. Like you might have a lot of players who have kind of played through an injury. So they would then spend their off season getting that sort of imbalance or that injury correct, that they could kind of go better at the start. Some of them might want to put on a few pounds of muscle, so they would use that off time. And they're so aware of all that sort of stuff. And then again, believe it or not, a lot of players would use that to what we just spoke about as well, their individual plans and their individual training sessions to improve certain areas and things like that. So I find a lot of the county players nowadays, they're fairly tuned in on what they need to do. And as I said, very few of them come back in bad nick. Very few of them, and they're always constant contact with their support teams in terms of their S&C, their nutrition, getting advice here and there. But downtime is very, very important. And I do think that they use that very, very cleverly now. So, like, for instance, they're all playing club championship at the moment. When they exit the club championship, they will have a bit of time to downtime. But as I said to you, most of them straight away are looking to say, right, we got to shake this dodgy quad, or I have to see, can I get my ankle a little bit stronger? I don't want to wear straps anymore. So they start straight away thinking like that and doing stuff like that. So that's a massive, massive difference. I think tactically, the players are like, look, if you looked at how Tyrone nearly playing this year, like there's no defined position. Then players could play nearly. You've seen their fullbacks line scoring in the semi-finals, coming in long range points. I think that's an area, like years ago when you played football, you were either a fullback or you're a cornerback, and that's it. Now a lot of players are more fluid. They can play in a number of positions, and I think that's a good thing too. And I think the more players that can offer more solutions, because that means, on the field, you have on the field solutions. You can move a player from A to B and still hopefully get the same effect. So I think a lot of players are tactically and technically better, certainly better than than when I was playing in that way.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the tactics side of the game, I suppose GAA teams are really drawing inspiration from other sports, particularly basketball. I think someone's dad, I can't remember, some player, their dad said, geez, I'm watching a bloody basketball match at the moment. What do you think what do you think other sports could take from the GAA and implement to their own game from what we're doing?
Okay, well, I think what I think when other sports look at GAA, and I love looking at, I love listening to top coaches, be it from American football or basketball or whatever, when they first come across hurling or football. They're all gobsmacked about how we're only amateur.
Yeah.
And that's the first thing. And I think what they can do, what they all strive to take from us, is the team spirit that we generate. Like when a team wins a club championship or a county championship, they're like a band of brothers or sisters. They become very, very, very close. That they're all fighting for the same cause. And I know that sounds cliche, but I'd imagine that's quite hard to get in a professional environment where you're always introducing new players and they come back with different egos and stuff like that. I know they're professional and they'll tick all the right boxes, but I still think that what we have is special, and I think that that's what a lot of other sports would gain from us. How do you the passion, what it means to play for your county, what it means to play for your club, that sort of stuff, like that's incredible. Like, you only have to look at local soccer. Like a soccer club could pop up tomorrow and then disband 2 months later on. Like, that never happens with GAA club. You play with your club, and what you probably have is a few lads moved clubs in GAA because they either moved areas or they've dropped a grade so they get a gain. But generally, players don't leave where they're from, and they support them. And you get a great. You look at the pride that's in even like Meath. Like Meath have got many ex-players, that have won numerous All-Irelands, right? And they have a great standing in the game in the county, and a lot of players look up to them, and that to have that is amazing, and I think that's the biggest thing that we have, for other coaches to take.
What have you picked up from other sports, and what sports are you really looking at?
Yeah, I would look at a lot of sports. Obviously, the obvious one would be like the soccer and basketball, but they've always had far more information on coaching and tactics than ours, and they have great sort of coaching resources, and they will share a lot of information. But most field sports are very similar, and you can nearly say field sports or court sports, whatever. There's only 4 things ever happening in the game. So number 1, you're attacking. Number 2, you're defending. Number 3, you're transitioning from attack to defense. Number 4, you're transitioning from defense to attack. Mm-hmm. So if you take any sport, like we watch Champions League tonight or whatever, that's what's happening. So if you can kind of, I know I'm very simplifying it, right? But if you can kind of say to your players, right, you need to get in your head, what's your relationship to one of these 4 things? So I find that a lot. They have a great way of explaining that. Like, you take Manchester City, right? He talks about, Pep talks about, creating space by moving and why you're creating space. And he has all his little small sided games for that, right? And again, highlighting that at any point you're related to one of these 4 activities. So that's game sense. So I think, like, you take basketball, okay, it's obvious that it's smaller, right? They can kind of organize more plays, but you still have a relationship to one of them things that happen. Mm-hmm. And I think we can take a lot from that in terms of trying to give players more responsibility to identify when you're in one of these 4 phases, right? And ask yourself, and I believe, right, like, you can only think of one thing at a time. So if you're kind of saying to yourself, right, we're attacking now, we're transitioning to attack. Do I need to move into space? Do I need to move to the ball? What's my relationship to this? And vice versa. Am I help side for defense when we're transitioning to defense? That sort of stuff. And I think that gives players sort of a little bit of clarity in the role and a little bit of responsibility and a relationship with each move. So again, I would pick up a lot of that. I see a lot of that in the soccer and in the basketball, and try to kind of, like, all coaches are thieves. And try to rob a little few things from that and see, can we even the phrasing of it, even the terminology of it. I think it's, players like that, and they think, okay, you're saying nothing different. You're just saying, go out there and work hard, make sure you chase when you don't have the ball, make sure you run when we do have the ball. But you're saying it in a different way that they think, this sounds good.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Out of interest, Colm, a lot of, like, what you're outlining there, whether you're out training or coaching yourself, or you're looking at other sports, how often do you actually think about Gaelic football, let's say during the week, or even in a 24-hour day?
I probably a lot. Like, I mean, I'd be already now preparing for next year, and
Okay.
looking at the games that have just gone ahead, and just looking again, modelling, seeing is there any new trends. Again, I think, right, this is just my own thing. I've noticed a lot in the All Ireland final and the two semi-finals. I've noticed numerous times everybody in one half, 14v14 in one half. So it looks like if a team retreats, another team is following them up there. Now, their ball skills are very, very good. They're trusting each other and their decision making. You have things like a fella standing on the halfway line conducting where the ball is going to go, and quietly confident that if it breaks down, they can scramble the defence very, very quickly. Normally, you'd always hear somebody saying, you've got to leave the +1 back, you've got to leave someone back. I've noticed now in large parts, teams not doing that. Then I've noticed things like, especially from behind the goals, you'll see a team on the attack, and then behind them, you just see two sets of 1v1s, not extra men. So, I mean, I think that's changing, and I think that's coming back to what we spoke about earlier on. All players are comfortable on the ball from any positions. Like years ago, people would be saying tactically, find a cornerback that can't kick the ball and make him kick it.
Yeah.
Now
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
all these boys can do that now. So you can't. If you try to sort of do that against a team, they'll expose you. Like so I notice things like that. So I'd be thinking of right sort of stuff. How do I implement that into training? How do we identify that? How do I prepare the players to face that? That when that happens, that we end up with everyone behind the ball, that they push everybody up, and you're playing the game in one half. So trying to come up with games and scenarios like that you'll be just thrown out. And then what I would do then is, like, part of the game, we play the game with that and say nothing, and just let the players figure it out, and then get their feedback afterwards. A few of them, saying, "Why are you doing that for now?" And then, you engage, you get the conversation going that way. And that, if it happens to them, they've experienced it then in your training. So I think, I would watch a lot of games like that and see what trends are happening, what modeling happening, like, things like that. So I think that's very, very important.
Mm-hmm. If you could be the fly on the wall for a week with any team or coach in the world, who would it be and why?
Okay, good question. Like, I like I love watching all them sports documents like the Lions tours and all of the All or Nothing documents. They're really, really good, and they get you into dressing rooms, and they're really quite they reveal quite a lot. Like, and sometimes you'd see things or you'd hear things that sort of because you're involved in them dressing rooms themselves, you're kind of saying, oh God, yeah, I know what he means by that. I like Jurgen Klopp. I love his attitude at the minute, and Eddie Jones. I always enjoy Eddie Jones because he's a big believer in sharing, and he's an attitude of once I share it, I have to find something new. Now, it's not quite as clear cut as that, but I kind of get that and I like it. But right now, I'd love to spend a week over in Leeds United with Marcelo Bielsa.
Okay.
And I believe they have values and behaviours that are very, very key to what they try to do that other teams don't have. Like, for instance, numerous times they've been tested, they've been heavily defeated, they missed out on promotion once or twice, but they keep doing what they believe in and they keep training. And I'd love to see, how they react to like a 6-1 defeat, or a heavy defeat to Liverpool at the weekend. And how do they bounce back? What do they do in training? And like everybody talks about his mortar ball sessions and stuff like that, and that outrageous sort of running expectancy that they have. So I'd love to see things like that, because everybody kind of reckons that that's a little bit different than what the sort of normal teams are doing. So someone like him would be very, very interesting. And I love their kind of win principle, the WIN, where what's important now is their attitude. So I'd love to see a little bit of that and kind of find out, how the players kind of buy into that sort of culture.
If you were to kind of look across all the teams you've been involved in, and there's no need to name anyone here, what are the common characteristics or attributes of the top athletes have you seen?
Yeah, they love what they're doing. Like, if you can imagine, like I have 3 boys here, and if you can imagine when they were 5 and 6, walking everywhere with a ball under their arm, soling it or dribbling along the ground, the top players are still like that today.
Okay.
Right, they're still nearly only short of having the ball under their arm, and they love what they're doing, and they just love playing. They're the first at training, they're the last to leave training. They're the ones that are always exploring things. They're the ones that are always inquisitive. They're the ones that always want to know, and they stick out a mile. And they're the ones that nothing is a chore to. They just love it, right? And now, I know, like, again, as you kind of get older, you look back, and that doesn't last forever. And life changes, and when a player goes into a county panel and he has that love for a game, everything's great. But then the years go by, he kind of, other things. It's not that he loves it any less. It's just he begins to kind of experience more things, and he just mightn't have that love for the game. You mightn't be able to find that extra half an hour for that session, that extra session that we talked about, that you could always find time for. They start working, careers, all that sort of stuff. They might be a little bit more tired, all that sort of stuff. But they're the ones to me that stick out, and they're everywhere. And every club has them, and you can pick them out a mile away. The fella that's there first, the fella that's there last, the fella that's picking up the cones, the fella that's kind of, doing everything, just loves being there and loves playing.
I'm going to move on to the sideline 7. It's the same 7 questions at the end of every episode. Question 1, what is your favourite quote?
I've loads of different quotes, but the one I picked out today is "Life's short, enjoy every sandwich."
Okay.
And that's from a fella called Warren Zevon. He's a singer from America, and what he basically means is slow down, listen to the birds, hug your kids, and smell a rose, so I like that one.
That's a little mention as well to your cooking. You've been putting up a lot of pictures and recipes up recently online.
Yeah, I have a laugh when we do that. I say to all the lads and in the house, my wife, and I said, "Watch now the amount of followers I lose now." All these, because
nobody was interested.
No one's interested. It seems to irk people. They say, "Do so I'm not following him for cookery things."
Brilliant.
But sure, it's only a hobby, bit of crack.
Yeah, a bit of crack. Yeah. Best sporting event you've been to?
Okay, well, I've been to New York Knicks a couple of times. I like going to watch them. I've seen Real Madrid play with Ronaldo a few times, but nothing comes close to a semi-final or an All-Ireland final that's in a packed house. And for instance, the semi-finals and the finals that have just gone by, the tension is palpable, right, when there's a close game. Now, it has to be a close game. I've been at All-Ireland finals when it hasn't been close, and you know the result.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
But when they're close, there's nothing like it. Like the place creaks. It's unrehearsed drama. Nobody knows what's going to happen, and there's nothing that comes close to that for me.
Biggest setback or challenge so far in your career?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that. Again, as I said, only one team can win a championship or a league, so you're going to lose more than you win. I've been very lucky that in all the teams I've coached to date, that I'm still in touch with people in them clubs and stuff like that. So any relegation or heavy defeat is very, very difficult to get over. And as I said, I've been involved in some of them, but I like to think, as I said, when I look back, that I still remain friends with there's somebody in every club or county that I still talk to on a regular basis, and that. So to me, that's a sort of challenge. I'd be more interested in kind of remaining friends with people and stuff like that. So sometimes I get when a heavy defeat, and that's a challenge. I think is kind of maintain a bit of relationship with somebody when they think you're not doing what you should be doing and stuff like that.
I know what you mean. Kind of on the flip side, then, your biggest achievement on or off the pitch?
Well, for me, it's family. Like, I've been married 26 years, I've 3 kids, and everyone's healthy, and everyone enjoys football. But that's my biggest achievement to date, without doubt.
Looking back, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self?
Work your left hand more.
Okay.
I couldn't, it's incredible. When I was coaching the kids and stuff like that, I'd always be, it took them years to come on. We'd be hand passed and doing exercise, and I would say to them, "Now use your left." They'd all use left, but I'd never change my left. I'd always be working the right, and they never copped on until they got a little bit older. So you're not using your left, I couldn't, But so I would love to be able to be sort of a little bit bilateral. And the thing about that is that doesn't need to be efficient. It just needs to be kind of enough to get you out of trouble. And I think sometimes everybody expects because you can't do the same with both feet, and I think the bar is too high in that, and especially for run race players, you need to just kind of bring to their attention that it doesn't need to be the same, but it just needs to work.
Okay. Okay.
So I'd like that.
Dream dinner guest, and why?
Okay, this one, I thought a good bit about this, and we're very lucky that both my parents and my parents-in-law are still alive. So anytime we have them down, it's great. So that's a good day. Anytime we have them down.
Very good. Final question before I let you go. If your life was a book, what chapter would this be called?
Friday.
Okay.
They say each decade of your life represents a day in the week. So I'm starting my weekend, and I'm hoping for a bank holiday.
Okay. Brilliant. Look, Colm, thanks so much for your time. I just want to wish you the very best of luck moving forward. Really enjoyed that, and we'll definitely keep in touch.
Thanks very much, Arla.
A big thank you to Colm for joining me today. I'll be sure to leave all of his social media links below as he shares some more resources and trails over on his social media platforms. If you did enjoy the episode or got something from it, please do let me know. And if you are listening on Apple Podcasts, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and a review, as it does help the show grow. And don't forget to check out the brand new website, thesidelinelive.com, for more. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one.